Hello and welcome. This is Jen T. Grace. I am the founder and CEO of Publish Your Purpose, and I'm here with Paula Throckmorton today. How are you doing, Paula?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here because we're talking about your book called Too Busy for Enlightenment, A Skeptic's Guide to Higher Energy. Like, what a great topic. Oh, Paula, okay, so I have so many things I want to talk about. So, like, your topic is just so interesting. Your book is absolutely gorgeous. I have obviously a visual for folks to see. But I want to hear a little bit about your background before we kind of dive into kind of how this book came to be and such.
Sure. I guess in the broadest sense, I grew up a little bit outside, looking at life from a different point of view than most people, because my father was a marine archaeologist and I spent 4 months a year on a boat. So I was looking at the land from the point of view of a boat. I was looking at domestic life from the point of view of somebody who was not living it. And so I went through a traditional college and working life. I worked in traditional business, but I always had that question of like, what exactly is life about? What makes a good life? I was always looking at it from somewhere else. So I'm a super traditional person. I went to regular schools and graduate schools, but I'm also that kid with her head on the rail, looking out at other people's lives or life on earth and saying, what's going on here? What's important?
Yeah. I've always been just kind of fascinated, just working together, kind of fascinated about your background and like what your father did, because I feel like it must just give you such a different perspective on the world than somebody who never had, experiences like that. So I'm not surprised that you're like just kind of what you just said. It's like not surprising to me based on your background.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to get into kind of the idea of higher energy, and then also deciding to actually put this in the form of a book?
Sure. I think there's some expression by a far better known writer than me that says that your life is what happens while you're trying to do different thing. And so while I was having my traditional life, working in business, writing a little bit, reviewing books, I almost had a side hustle where it was like I learned to meditate when I was very young. I was an exchange student in Brazil, and I had a very dramatic experience of higher energy with a group of mediums where my body started to move against my will. And so I would have an experience of touching on something that feels a little bit like love, a lot like peace, a lot like joy. And then like a rubber band, I would ricochet back to my traditional life and say, I do not want to be hanging out with mediums in Brazil. I want to go to college and have a 401k plan. So really what happened was that over time, those experiences and practices and the feeling of really being at peace and feeling as if I were love or I were peace, those feelings kept calling me back. And so eventually I just really pursued practices to touch on those feelings.
Mm. And so it's, like I know that the kind of the framing, a lot of the framing, or at least the theme, is that just higher energy is healing. And right now you're talking about kind of like meditation. Can we kind of, no pun intended, but like kind of go a level higher and just kind of maybe define how we're talking about higher energy to just provide a little more context for those who are watching?
Sure. It's a tough question. One of the hardest things in the book was to think of the term higher energy, to choose it instead of something else, and then to define it. The way I think of higher energy is that it's a feeling. So that makes it hard to describe. The thing that I think it feels like is when you're a teenager and you fall in love for the first time, where you feel light, you feel at peace, your limbs aren't tight. You look out at the world you live in and your pesky sister, you can see what a beautiful person she is underneath everything. Your obnoxious chemistry teacher just seems like somebody who's trying to hold down a job. And you go by the trash cans on your way to school and you think, God, it's amazing I live in a system where somebody else takes out my trash, because that wasn't true for my grandmother's grandfather. And so it's a feeling of being at peace and feeling love, but also seeing peace and seeing love in the outer world where you might not have earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about it as an emotion, but there's like it's like a way of being. It
Yeah,
sounds.
I would say it's a feeling. It's a combination. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's almost like I wouldn't want to say it's a lifestyle because that's not what it is. But it's because I feel like lifestyle in some ways actually has like negative connotations to it. But it's just kind of like a way in which to live.
Mm-hmm. An experience, I would say. It's an
Yeah.
experience of ourselves and an experience of the world.
Yeah, that's a good word, experience. And I remember when we were brainstorming, like both the title and the subtitle, which is a huge part of this process. And it was a good amount of kind of like collaboration and thought and thinking through using like what the subtitle would be. And so we ended up with a skeptic's guide to higher energy. So we talk a little bit about kind of a skeptic who might be watching and are like, I don't really know if higher energy is for me. Like this is written for that person. Like that is definitely someone who can wrap their head around this. So how are we kind of looking at someone who's skeptical?
I think I'm looking at that person through the lens of being myself. Where I came to the experience of higher energy really through experience. So if I were away in the Himalayas meditating with a group of people, I might be with 10 Americans who had all read a lot of books or all understood a spiritual framework. And I didn't want to believe in anything. I was like, how do I know? Like, I don't want to give myself over to something, to some tradition and call myself that tradition. I just was drawn to experience in a sense. And so what happened with me was that I maintained my skeptical outlook, where I was like, these monks are dressed in sheets and they have no hair and their arms don't swing. Like, I don't want that. Like, I want to be at home raising my kids and I want a bigger apartment. And so I would be skeptical about what people believed or what their lifestyle was, but then an experience would make me think about what they were actually doing, like the idea of dressing humbly. I would think about that, let's say. So, in the broadest way, the book is made for somebody who is completely skeptical about what they can't touch or see, but has a feeling that there's something else going on.
Yeah.
We get like, I think oftentimes people when they're kids and they see their mother, in a panic about the electric bill or that the kitchen counter got burned, and there are kids who look out at that and they're like, I think there's something else more important than the kitchen counter happening in the world. Like, I smell a rat here. What's really going on, right? And so this book is for that person, who doesn't want to be told to believe anything.
I think that's very well put, really well said. And with the fact that it's kind of a skeptic's guide, there's a practicality to it too, right? So you have a lot of kind of, as you described it, like simple things that people can do to kind of tap into that higher energy. So I know meditation is one of them, but is there another kind of piece of it that you might want to just kind of highlight and emphasize for the conversation?
Sure. I mean, when I first started out thinking about these things, I didn't want to do anything weird. I was like, I don't want to be wearing a sheet. I don't want to be in a faraway country, because I thought that a lot of the practices that help people touch on higher energy were odd. But that was just because it was my imagination. But in fact, there's so many different things. Like meditation is the obvious one because you can do it anytime. Prayer is super, super powerful. Walking in nature is something everybody can do almost and works 100% of the time. There's all different kinds of breath work that people can do. And there's lots of movement that people can do, where there's things like Tai Chi and yoga. And in those things, sometimes you need a special teacher with a novice. So you can just try something. Like if you have a jockey strain, do something with your body. If you love to sing, find people who chant. Chanting in another language will really bring you out of your brain and into your heart. If you're somebody who's a little bit shyer like me, meditation is great because it gives you a break from the hum of life. So, I mean, there's so many ways, but those are the ones I think of that we can do alone.
Yeah. And I like that you kind of just acknowledge that, like, meditation for someone who might be maybe a little more shy, possibly a little more introverted, there's like that. But there's also meditation for people who want to like still be moving their body. Because I think sometimes people think meditation is like, I have to be in absolute stillness mentally and physically. But what you're saying is actually not that at all. And I think that might be maybe freeing for some people who might be wanting to explore what meditating looks like. But they just have this perception of what that looks like. And it's not a perception based in reality.
Yeah. I mean, these practices, like, they'll all take you there eventually. But the road is shorter if you're doing something you like to do. So I have a terrible, terrible singing voice. And one of my yoga teachers is very into chanting. And so you do yoga, then you chant, then you meditate. And during the chanting period, I was just like paying my bills and going over my kids' schedules and making fun of everybody because I get embarrassed singing. Yeah. So it took me like 3 years of chanting to feel a little liftoff. If you're a lawyer and you're highly analytic, meditation takes longer. There's studies that have shown this, but eventually you'll get that floating feeling. It's nice to start with something that you like to do anyway.
Absolutely. And I love that you include nature in that. That's definitely my jam, is just to be outside. I hate being indoors, regardless of what the weather is looking like. So it's just nice to know that is an alternative path. That's nice. Still, but like you said, eventually gets you to the kind of place that you're looking for. And I do want to talk a little bit about meditation because you have a meditation group that you've been running for almost 4 years at this point, which is incredibly, like, to me, it's an incredible dedication to your meditative practice and then the accountability to all of the people who are just expecting that you're going to be there at 5 p.m. So can we talk a little bit about kind of the origin of that? Like, what prompted you? Because it happened right before COVID. So like what were you sensing in the universe that you were like, I need to start doing this?
Well, I was sensing nothing. I had a really good friend who had a health scare, and I lived very close to the hospital across the street. And she started going to the hospital every day. She was feeling very anxious. So she would stop off at my house and we would do a guided meditation. So I've learned different techniques from regression, from different methods of meditation. And so I would use some of those techniques just to bring her in deeper and deeper, almost like a hypnosis. And then COVID happened and we moved our meeting to Zoom. So it was just the two of us for a few days. And then she asked a couple people and they asked a couple people. And so now I think it's a few hundred people have done it every day. It's, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 20 or 30 people. And at 5 o'clock, we all just log into the Zoom link and I guide for about 15 minutes and then we meditate for 20. And so it's the same every day from 5 to 5:35. And you can come once a week, you can come once a month. Some people have come every day for 4 years. And the great thing about doing something that long is that it's like we took meditation from the world of like gongs and incense and like our intention to be quiet. And we just plunked it down into the living room with our loud dogs and our irritating children and our needy spouses. And so by kind of bringing meditation into daily life, it's made it more possible for people to do it regularly.
Mhm.
So sometimes people start and they have to go, or they leave early or they come late. So it's been fun. It's been
Yeah.
super fun.
And I love that to me, like my takeaway is that you've made it accessible, right?
Mhm.
Because I think sometimes, even though meditation in theory should be something that is accessible to everybody, I think maybe is it a mindset hurdle? Is it like, what do you think the hurdle is for somebody to like listening to this conversation right now, being like, wow, I have to go buy Paula's book. And then knowing that you have this available, like, but there's something stopping them from being like, you know what, I'm gonna pop into her meditation thing. Like, do you see like some friction point there?
Oh yeah. I mean, I can really speak about it only for myself. I mean, I think that when I'm in my daily life, including now when I host this meditation, I get so busy that I feel like I don't want to give that up. I'm having so much fun in a meeting, or I'm having so much fun. I finally figured out this particular thing in my business. And in my imagination, I'm like, meditation is like a different country. I can't visit that state. I don't want to. I don't need to. I'm in a good mood. I don't need to meditate. It seems like you have to take a ferry and go to another island, where really I have one meditator who always says this, where she says, I don't feel like I need it. And then 5 minutes later, I'm completely dropped in a different world, so that in a way, it's like the best way to meditate is just meditate. Like, don't think about it,
Mhm.
and you'll have those awful meditations and where you think about your taxes for 35 minutes, and you'll have those great meditations where you think about your taxes for 2 minutes and you drop in. And
Mhm.
it's all the same. It's all good. Even to sit in anxiety about your taxes for 30 minutes is awesome, because you don't do it with the other 23 and a half hours of the day. you know?
Yeah, it's creating that kind of moment of stillness, even if you're just wrapped in that anxiety. I think that, to me, that's like a permission slip, because I think
Completely.
right, like we think we have to come into this and like immediately know how to do it, but it
Yep.
takes practice.
Completely. Completely. I have a teacher who's in her 80s, and she is a real meditation teacher. Like, that's her whole life. And she's had a very broad life in this area. And sometimes we meditate together on Zoom, unrelated, and she just goes into her phone. She's like, I can't meditate. I just have been texting my daughter the whole time.
And at least she's honest. That's really cool. And do you think, because I know that before we went live, we were talking about kind of this idea of just changing the frequency, right? Like thinking about like an old radio dial and just kind of like changing the frequency and that's kind of like broadly speaking, not just through meditation, but I imagine that meditation has probably maybe a quick impact on being able to help change that frequency, even if it's just for 35 minutes.
Definitely. I'm talking to you from New York, and I grew up in Greece and America. And all of the tax dollars that went to my education trained me how to use my brain and how to act. I learned how to get over my nervousness and, do something that my team needed with a ball. I learned how to write. I learned how to take tests. I learned how to organize people and be a follower and be a leader.
Mhm.
It's like our whole education is outer directed,
Yeah.
to get us to manipulate the world in some way, to get us to um, make homes for ourselves in the broadest sense, right? To get us to negotiate with other people and be part of a community. What we're not trained to do in America and in Europe is really to turn inward, so it's as if we have an inner coach inside there with some wisdom that's
Yeah.
just sitting there. And it's as if we have an inner peace and an inner joy and an inner experience of being love that's just sitting there waiting for us. And
Yeah.
so we don't really have to do much. It's like just like I think of it like when you wake up in the night and you have your head on the pillow and then you just turn to the left and you're back asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's that simple. It's just turning and then you tune into a different frequency. You don't have to try the different frequency or try to get there. It's just turning away from the outer world and
Yeah.
training yourself to do that.
Yeah, it's observing. Yeah, I love that. And I believe my screen is blank right now. Is that correct, Paula?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, my computer froze at some point, and now my camera won't restart. But the joys of technology.
No problem.
Well, we're close to kind of our conclusion here, and so your book is available wherever books are sold. So I always encourage folks to purchase it wherever makes sense. And I'm a big fan of bookshop.org, which is a certified B Corp, which means they have a commitment to social responsibility and environmentally friendly business practices and things like that. So always kind of recommending them, just because PYP is also a B Corp. So I feel like it's trying to do business, with others that have similar values. But your book, for people who are interested in learning more about the meditation, they can certainly go to your website, which is scrolling along the bottom of the screen. Are there anything else that you want to share that you think might be relevant or point people in any other directions?
I guess if I had one thing to say to people, it would be that like wherever you are, don't worry about it. Like we all want to be a little bit more peaceful. We all want to, whatever the practices that we're not doing, stretching when we wake up in the morning. It's like, don't feel bad about it. If you don't want to meditate, don't meditate. If you don't want to, walk in nature, don't walk in nature, and then when you do, you enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great. It's just, your approach is that you're giving a lot of autonomy and permission for people to not have to know what they're doing and not have to do it. And I'm air quoting, no one can see me, but like, right? Like there's no right way to do this.
Exactly.
I love this so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's always, to me, it's like such a joyous time to be able to kind of like sit and just reflect back on the process and what it took to kind of get here. And now it's in the phase of people being impacted by your work, which is just always so incredible. So thank you for having this conversation.
And Jen, thank you for having me, and thank you for starting your company and publishing the book. I really appreciate all the work you've done, and I feel like I benefit from it. So thank you.
Yes, of course. If I could clone you and have a whole bunch of Paulas that we work with, it would be a dream. So so easy. And living, to me, it's like walking your walk and talking your talk, truly. So it's just a beautiful thing to be around. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for saying that. That's so nice. And thank you everybody for listening and watching.
Yes, and like I said, head out to Amazon or Books A Million or bookshop.org, all the places you can get the book. It's Too Busy for Enlightenment, A Skeptic's Guide to Higher Energy. And thank you for being here, and I will see you all again real soon.